Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this weekly ag weather forecast for AgSouth Farm Credit. All right, in this video, I'm going to front load with our new long-range information. We have to have a good discussion about this because of some of the changes we've been seeing in the recent forecasts, and we need to dig into it. What I'll then transition to is a bit of short-term forecast. We'll look out over the next couple of weeks at any sort of threats we've got coming into AgSouth territory. And then I'm going to come back to the long range again at the end. I want to talk about one particular year that's renting a lot of space in my brain right now, and that year is 2020, and I'm going to tell you why. We'll finish up with the global outlook. I've been leaving you on the Climate Prediction Center's webpage because just this morning on Thursday, they updated this. Now, I'm recording a day early because I'm supposed to fly home from Arizona tonight, getting into Dallas first and then going to Chicago. But there might be some severe weather in Dallas, and as a result, I may not make it. So I wanted to make sure I get you your content in case I have some travel troubles. What is interesting is earlier this month, they released their new outlook, and they're now suggesting that by June through August, a better than 60% chance of having a La Niña develop. And that means transition. Something is going to be changing. So I'd like to walk through this with you right to get the start of everything today. The first maps we want to look at is their new May temperature outlook. And there's parts of this that I agree with and parts of this that are a bit of a head scratcher for me. Specifically, the wet forecast that's been given for this area. Now, we are not expecting any major blows to our temperature coming up. Okay, no late crazy freezes. We're going to get some of that across the north here, even though they're expecting May to be warm. To finish April, we're going to look at some cooler weather here. But this question about wet conditions over AgSouth territory in May is something we have to think hard about. Take a look at what the European model is suggesting. This is its May outlook. A little bit different, right? We don't see the strong wet anomalies in this area from the European model out that far. And neither do we see, if we just flip this over to temperature really quickly, the really strong case for being hot. Now, again, it's just a model. We have to take it at face value. But I want to compare that to what you just saw here, which is, oh, sorry about that. Remember, you got to hover over it to get what you want to see. There you are. As the slightly warmer but wetter outlook. So you start thinking about where did they get this idea from? And so I want to take you to this. This is what happens when you look at every year that there was an El Niño event in winter that fell apart in spring and then was gone by summer and possibly even La Niña by summer. And while we did not have a strong correlation with our temperature when you stitch all of those years together for the month of May, precipitation-wise, we were a bit wetter. So I guess my point here is to say that the European model is the outlier. History would suggest near normal to wetter than normal conditions for AgSouth, and the new update from the Climate Prediction Center suggests that as well. Now, when I made that forecast for you, what I did was I stitched together all of these years that had El Niños. There were all these spikes up, and what happened to them afterward, they all crashed. So we wanted to know, when we put them all together, what did we end up getting? But we currently sit right here, and the question is, do we make it fully into La Niña by summer? What does it mean for the hurricane season? What does that mean for all of the variables that affect our summer weather? Or is it much slower pace? And I'm going to bring you up to speed by showing you a comparison between several models. We're going to go to the Bureau of Meteorology's website. This is out of Australia. And their projections for the Niño 3.4, that's the middle of the equatorial Pacific, is that this particular INSO-neutral regime that we're in now is likely going to stay all the way through September. In other words, very few of their ensemble members are actually dipping this down fully into La Niña. What's important to note here is that the great thing about their website is they like to compare all of the models. So themselves, this is the Australians to the Canadians, the Europeans, the Japanese, the French, the US, and the British. Now watch this. May to June. Look at the models that are aggressively going toward La Niña. The Canadians, the US, and the British. July, even more so. August, it's only the Europeans, the French, and the Bureau of Meteorology out of Australia that have not bought into a July to August transition fully into La Niña. And by September, they're all looking like this. So what does that mean? That means there's not agreement in these longer range model forecasts. And so we've got some big questions to ask because I have been proposing this as an idea. I've shown you this many times. And all I did here was I stitched together all of those years and said, was there any sort of commonality? And what we found was we tended to be hotter in summer. We tended to be warm with the overnight lows. And we tended to find drought in kind of one of three different centers or situations here, maybe over the Southwest, over this part of the Delta, and a couple of these years. 2016 sticks out as a sore thumb, where it was over the Southeast and hitting the AgSouth territory. Now, my ideas about this are shifting, and they're changing a bit. And I'd like to make a bit of a case for you as to why that might be the shift, and why my concern over big southeast ridging, which would cause the number 3 scenario to be the case in summer, maybe I shouldn't be so focused on it. I'll make this case for you 3 different ways. We're going to look at the new long-range data that came out from the European model, compare it to the NMME. And then I'm also going to compare this all to the CPC, and at the end, 2020. All right, May, June, July. What are the models saying? Now remember, the European model is the slow model to get rid of El Niño. The NMME, that's part of NOAA's weather forecasting system, is fast. This is their May, June, July outlook for precip. I mean, they've still got us in a pretty stormy setup in spring. What about as we get into summer, June, July, August? Okay, what are the models saying? Again, if they're talking about drought, it's back here in the western plains, coming out of the Four Corners and then bridging into the Midwest, although slower in the European model. What about later? What about July, August, September? All right, I still don't see a major threat in the models to the southeast, but you can see where the drought's expected to move farther to the north than that. And so we're just looking at these timeframes and seeing an August, September, October timeframe with an extremely active hurricane season, which we've been talking about. Some models are doubling up on the normal numbers. What do we do? Well, can I look for some consistency in another place? Let's go back to the CPC website. I want you to do this on your own too, cpc.ncep.noaa.gov. When you get here, you can come hover over the words 3-month outlook. Do that. Now, if you want to see the pretty maps that are showing you probabilities, go have a look. But I'm more interested in actually seeing the forecast model runs, which are shown here. So all I did, was I clicked on 3-month outlook. I clicked on that link, and I'm taken to this page. Okay, May, June, July precipitation. It too is wetter than average for you. What about June, July, August? Still wet and stormy. Where's the drought? Here. What about by the time we get into July, August, September, the beginning of the hurricane season? Still wet. The drought's now migrated into the central United States, not only hitting the winter wheat belt, but hitting the western corn belt. And it's anchored in this side of the cotton belt. That's July, August, September. August, September, October, the beginning of, or the middle part of the hurricane season, expected to be quite active. So I see some consistency here, but I just have to call into question if the analogs are right or if the new model runs are right. And I'm going to be honest, I don't know at this point. We're going to have to wait to see. So much will be changing over the next 45 days. What I do know is this. Looking at the newest drought monitor for North America, we're not in drought in AgSouth territory. Yeah, there's a couple places in North Carolina that have been drier, and that's important to monitor. Don't let me act flippant about it. But just by comparison standards, look at Mexico into the Southwest. Look at Canada. Look at this part of the Midwest. I start to see those areas and just wonder if the models are attempting to link this and bridge this and then expand it into this area. The only way we get a massive drought in the southeast is if the Bermuda High slinks over or we just develop big domes of high pressure here soon. And we've not seen the atmosphere do that. It's just not been in a position to do that yet. So that's why when we look back at the temperature pattern since the beginning of April, we've gone back over to favoring more mild days. Now, we are watching very cold air plummet through the midsection of the country. Not a frost threat for us, but cold air is coming. So that's going to offset some of this. But overall, the temperature pattern's been a major lack of heat in the west with more warm days than cold across much of the rest of the country, especially once you get past the Continental Divide. On the precipitation side of it, we've not been struggling since March. If you look at that whole time period, March through mid-April, we've not been struggling for moisture. Now, there's dry areas, but it's not broad, early drought concerns. You know what I'm saying? That's in part of the Mid-South. That's in Kansas. And it's partly into Texas as well. So with all of that just swimming around in the back of your head, stuff it away there for a moment. And we're going to come back to it again at the end when I talk about one specific year, 2020, that I think we need to have a discussion about. So let's take a look at what we got now. I'm recording this in the middle of the day here on Thursday again because I'm curious as to what might happen later today with I got to fly to Dallas and there might be some nasty storms in that area. But as you see, got a nice clear day overall for us here. But let's take a look at what's expected. Some of the storms that are moving through parts of the Midwest, let's get an update on this. There we go. Some of the moisture coming through parts of the Midwest desperately needed. Need to get as much of this in here as we can. But does it get over into our area? Because today on the Storm Prediction Center's outlook, they've got a pretty broad area. Let's get that update there of where there's the risk of those strong to severe storms. And then if we just flip this over to tomorrow, let's change that up. There you go. We're going to see that risk start to move its way into our region. So let's kind of take a look at what the models are suggesting. We're going to go to the high-res NAM to see this. So playing through, here we go. This is through Thursday afternoon and evening, getting into Thursday night over to Friday morning. You start to see the chances for some isolated showers and storms coming through on the tail end of that front. And it's going to be again on Friday night. We're going to keep an eye out in North Carolina for some of these storms. So again, here it is. This is tonight, getting into Friday morning, Friday midday, Friday evening, and playing until we get that front to clear. Now what's interesting is this front actually is leaving a lingering boundary right in through here, and we're going to start to deliver some moisture to it over parts of Texas, and that's where we're expecting some very heavy rains into the weekend. But we'll question, when do these start to press into our area by looking at some of the longer range models first. Before I get there, though, I want to get to the operational models and their predictions here on the pattern. So getting through the weekend, let's just start off on Saturday into Sunday. A lot of cold air in the northeast. We then watch overall as reinforcing cold air tries to come back into the northeast again around the 23rd, 24th, and 25th. But that's all up here. These are not deep troughs that are getting to us. What I then see is starting on the 24th and going through next Friday into next Saturday, we should expect to see a huge warm-up out ahead of this deep trough that comes into the west, meaning more severe weather late next week in the midsection of the country, which we know translates toward us. But still, this is not the threatening big high-pressure cell that can sit and live in this area come late spring, early summer that starts to get us worried about what could happen with our drought stress. So that's just the pattern here over the next 10 days. What do we get in terms of total precip? I'm going to give you a model comparison here. This is the artificial intelligence forecast over the next 7 days. This is the national blend of models over the next 7 days. So we're generally looking at these next couple of systems delivering somewhere in the neighborhood of, a quarter of an inch to a half inch of precipitation. It's much wetter as you get back over here towards Texas where the front lingers. Here's the GFS solution, and here's the European. So just notice we're not looking solidly at really wet conditions over the next 7 days. When does that begin to change? Well, let me take you back. I was a bit ahead of you here, but let's take you back and look at the model comparison between the GFS on the left and the European on the right. As we play forward, again, this is through this Friday into Saturday. There's the front that comes over us Friday night. Into Saturday, we saw the chances for some precip. After that, we just wait. We go into the weekend, maybe some scattered showers on Saturday night and Sunday over parts of Georgia and South Carolina, but the wettest weather will be back here in Texas. And as we play this into the rest of the weekend, this is Sunday night. That's going to clear through us, bringing us a chance for some rain. And then after that, we just wait. What we're waiting on is the pattern to develop another deep low over the west that's going to start to open up here this next Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. This is the 24th, 25th, and 26th, and we're going to see how that system starts to press its way toward us. So we have off and on chances of rainfall coming in a few different time periods over the next 5 days, but it's not too much rain. And that's why our chances over the next week of grabbing at least an inch of rain is pretty low. Like I said, these rainfall totals from the next few systems coming through are not big. But notice once I give you week 2 added into this, those probabilities really begin to increase. And that's when we start to see the atmosphere opening up to better flow coming out first into the plains, into the Mid-South, and moving toward our area. So the 2-week chance of getting an inch out of this pattern has now come up there around 50 to 70%. Okay, that's what we're looking at overall. That week 2 time frame, though, again, watch out from the 24th to the 28th for another big system to roll across the country. Until it gets to us, we do see a little bit of a drier signal. So maybe a fun way to kind of stitch this all together is just to come back to this European outlook and say, over the next 15 days, what are we looking at in terms of total precipitation? Let's go back to the 0Z run. We are a bit drier than normal, but we've got chances of moisture that are coming through. It's just not super wet. That makes sense? That's what we're kind of looking at. All right, on to the temperature side of this. Let's go here. That frost threat over the next 7 days stays to our north. But as we look out and just see what the temperatures are going to do, can I show you the min temperatures first? So Thursday's min's getting into Friday, still warm. Saturday, still warm. The front comes through, though, on Sunday. We start to cool back off. Look at the colder air coming in through here. So our low temperatures now go back into the 40s. And Tuesday morning, pretty chilly. Same thing for Wednesday morning, back into the 40s and 50s, mid-40s to low 50s, that time frame. Watch the high temperatures, though. Here's today on Thursday, getting into Friday, still warm. Saturday, remember, this is when the front starts to push toward us. There's the rain, cooled air coming in late this weekend. High temperatures struggling to get out of the upper 50s, lower 60s. We'll be in the 70s down here as we get farther south into Georgia. Here's Monday. Cooler air tries to clear. Tuesday, Wednesday, the rebound begins to happen. Look out there, day 5 through 10, starting to see the more mild air return. Day 10 through 15, this is when the jet stream is fully doing this, right? So that's when we're going to start to see the warm-up happening back into this area. That's echoed in the European model too. There's day 5 through 10, and here's day 10 through 15. So we're seeing this fluctuation in the pattern largely being driven by storm systems, and that's what we would expect. Okay, given what I just shared with you about the near term, can I come back to the long term for a second? This is where our ocean temperatures have changed since January. Watch. We were in a strong El Niño that faded in February. Watch as we get here. Sorry about that. Watch as we get here into March. Sorry, there's a wedding going on outside my hotel here in Arizona, so I don't know if you can hear them screaming, but they're playing some very loud music, having a good time. Anyway, the fade is happening. We're getting here into February and March where this El Niño is out. Now, what's interesting to me about this is that if we just pause it and look at this ocean temperature pattern right now, here's our potential for the active hurricane season. La Niña developing would help that, right, by reducing wind shear. But what about these ocean temperatures? And I mentioned to you earlier, 2020. This is why I'm thinking a lot about 2020. That's what the ocean temperatures look like in 2020 in April. Here they are this year. There they are in 2020. There's a lot of similarities. And by July, this is the way things looked in 2020. This continued to stay very warm, La Niña built in, and warmer water pushed up against this part of the Gulf of Alaska. And I'm anticipating that this year. So what happened? Well, June to August, we had some areas that developed some spotty drought. But unlike 2016, which was also an analog year, it wasn't the widespread massive drought. In fact, June to August, we tended to stay pretty stormy, much like what the models are suggesting right now. They're actually trying to build the drought in these areas, as you saw earlier, in the same thing with the new CPC update. On the temperature side of it, if there was heat, it was here. We didn't have an overly hot summer. Now, we have hot summers no matter what, but I'm talking about overly hot. So can you now see why 2020 is renting a little bit of space in my brain as a possible analog? What's interesting about it was the winter, here it is right here, in 2020 it only featured a weak El Niño, not a strong, but this behavior is what I'm curious about. Do we see something similar to this over the coming weeks and months? That's why I'm thinking so hard about it. If it does, we end up getting troughs of low pressure here. And if there's a ridge, it's living up in this area, not over us. That's the big worry. If that ridge lives over the southeast, we're baked, it's drought, we're talking about major crop failure. 2020 didn't do that. Unfortunately, what happened in 2020, though, is we followed it with one of the most active hurricane seasons. Let me rephrase that. The most active hurricane season on record. And right now, you know that all the long-range forecasts are suggesting an extremely active hurricane season. So I'm worried about this. This is just something I'm considering right now, and I think 2020 is a year we have to consider. To finish this up, I'm going to give you a bit of an international outlook. Very cold throughout Europe right now. Remains cold throughout much of central Australia as they go through their autumn time frame. This has been cold for a while. But if you look at the precipitation patterns compared to these temperatures, I want to focus on South America on that safrinha crop. Getting hotter and finally getting drier in here. That's something we predicted would happen in April. I just thought it would start in early April. That dryness in there, if it continues, will impact safrinha corn and safrinha cotton. Mainly safrinha corn, though, given it's more susceptible to really dry, hot conditions than cotton is. But some of the new long-range outlooks for the whole month of May back off that moisture in a big way, meaning we could start to see a story developing in safrinha corn very soon if this is enough to peel back the yield projections that have been given. But I'm going to leave you here with a global look at May based on the models, which is kind of where we started when thinking about the United States. So you know what I'm watching. I'll keep an eye on it. We'll talk again next week. Thanks.